Welcome to the Cosmic Dispatch, a show about bodies, celestial and earthbound, time, experience, and the relationship between all of them. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well, and if you're in Kingston, New York, listening to this, I hope you're dry. Oh, it is so wet. It's pretty relentless out there. And even this morning when it wasn't raining, when I was out for a walk, it was so humid. It felt like I was actually walking through something with some kind of substance. And then the air is so humid that like if you're sweating at all, it never really evaporates. Good times. Everything's just kind of soggy. Um, so yeah, I hope you're staying dry. We have a great show for you today. Lots going on this week featuring the planet Mercury. It's Cancer season, the season of the moon, but this week really belongs to Mercury. Mercury is the planet of the mind, cognition, communication, exchange, and movement. So if Mercury is going through a lot of changes and having lots of conversations with other planets, chances are that we'll be having more exchanges with other people and asking more questions and just trying to move things around. This week looks very restless, and there's this constant adjusting that seems to be happening. But also, in keeping with Cancer themed materials this month, and because of all the Mercury activity going on, I wanted to explore how we feed, which would be a Cancerian thing, the mind, which would be a more mercurial thing. How do we nurture the mind? This past month, I was working at a retreat that serviced parents and their kids, and I did a lot of family counseling. And one of the things that struck me in working with these parents is the number of times education came up, as in, I don't think traditional schooling is working for my kid. Or should I homeschool my kid? Or I think my child needs experimental curriculums. Um, and these were over half of the conversations I was having. It just kept coming up. One parent was even planning on taking her children out of school altogether and travel they wanted to travel the world for a few years while checking in with online homeschooling support organizations, which I didn't know those existed. But the cancer themed thread running through all of these conversations was basically turning the home into a school and turning the family into educators. And by the way, I love that, you know, taking the kids out of school and traveling the world, with the parents. That's a real education right there. Um, and of course, right, this makes sense. We're going through major transformations of school systems from K through 12 through to college. School no longer seems like a safe place, and nobody wants to be a teacher. And apologies to those of you who are like, what? I love being a teacher. I want to, this is what I'm doing with my life. I know a lot of people who are getting out of the workforce, as far as like K through 12 education and college education. There seems to be some kind of mass exodus. I'm even yeah, I'm noticing this through all types of learning situations. And just in my personal life as well, there are about three nonprofit organizations that I work with that are either talking about or in the middle of trying to institute or create these alternative MFA programs, Master of Fine Arts, um, and change, create opportunities to study the arts in more of a community based, cooperative, family style learning environment. And in my mind, this makes perfect sense. I don't think there's any real education without connection. Personal human connection is how we learn on a deeper level. So, as Pluto is finishing up its demolition work in Capricorn, I believe we're seeing the results of overly systematized, standardized, and regulated learning, which really isn't learning as much as it is some kind of indoctrination into a club or society or social strata. Very Capricornian things. Capricorn is corresponds to Cancer. Um, on the other side of the axis, we have Cancer, who would be more inclined to nurture minds and create a family style learning environment through relationships and emotional investment. So, today I have astrologer Mandee Sheeler back on the show because not only is she an astrologer, she's also a homeschooling parent. And we are going to talk about what that's like and discuss alternative ways to educate children. We may even have to like redefine for ourselves what education is. But before we do that and check in with the astro weather, just want to remind you that if you would like to have a question answered on the air during one of our full moon shows, and even sometimes we'll do just a straight up question and answer, um, like like quick round of just Mandee feeding me your questions and then me answering them. If you would like to have your question included, email us at thecosmicdispatch@gmail.com, and you can stay up to date with all of our content on Instagram. And please subscribe to the Cosmic Dispatch on YouTube if you're a visual person or if you just like to read along with the transcript and closed captioning. Okay, let's let's see what's cooking this week. So, Mercury. Mercury is being a very busy bee this week. It's going through lots of changes, having lots of interaction, but don't mistake all that movement for being superficial or lightweight because it's making contact with planets that have lots of power. For starters, today on the 9th, Mercury in Cancer is making a trine to Neptune in Pisces. Wherever you have Pisces and Cancer in your chart, know that those two parts of your chart, or two parts of your life, or two parts of your self, they're in harmonious or supportive interaction. This is a flowing aspect between two water signs, so that indicates some flowing emotion, sentiment, imagination. There's a lot of connectivity here. Water is a great conductor, but the influence that Neptune has on Mercury can be overwhelming. There can be a feeling that we can't think straight, even if we're overwhelmed by positive emotions. And I think that could be a good experience. I mean, do we need to have perfect control over our minds all the time? I actually think that's pretty limiting. Um, our conversations may be more sentimental today, or we may want to talk about our dreams or use language that's more flowery or evocative. We may be in the mood for a very romantic film or book, or we may just want to rest and let our minds drift. It's a great day to daydream. And even, you know, when you go to sleep tonight, um, you may have some pretty wild dreams or maybe some like wildly romantic dreams. But I would enjoy this day because the following day, which is tomorrow, July 10th, we we go a little darker with what Mercury is doing. So Mercury opposes Pluto tomorrow. It goes exact. And our conversations go deep, as in, we're thinking and talking about things that have been buried or hidden. Our minds are attuned to the story underneath the story. We're not taking anything at face value. And we're doing this in the name of security and protection. We're either being very secretive to protect ourselves, or we're trying to get to the bottom of someone else's secrets in the name of protection. So, this could be another big news day, either in the collective or personally, where we find out about something shady, perhaps, or we try to dig deeper into places we're not supposed to go. There's something a little taboo about the things we're searching for right now. And in keeping with the Mercury vibe, on the same day, July 10th, Mars enters Virgo. And the ruler of Virgo is Mercury. And now we know that Mercury is in its last degree of Cancer. And that makes Mercury incredibly sensitive right now. And it's aligned with Pluto. We know all these things about Mercury, and that's important because that affects the Mars situation because it's in Mercury's sign. So, as Mars, the planet of war, assertion, and direct action, starts its tour through Virgo, we could experience some aggressive criticism and an energetic drive to fix things. It'll it'll become like really especially annoying right now when things don't work, or you might be very sensitive if something is just a tiny bit off, and you might want to pour all of your energy into making all of these fixes. Virgo naturally wants to serve, heal, edit, and generally make things better. But when we put Mars in there, it's with a vengeance. um, so yeah, if you have a big cleaning project or a big editing project, you will have the energy you need to do a more than thorough job. I would just watch the relentless nitpicking or overcorrection of things. And of course, please don't turn this energy on yourself. It's just going to be too easy to see mistakes and sloppiness everywhere you look. So, cut yourself some slack if you can. It's going to be hard under this influence. You might be a little too harsh on yourself and others. The idiom that comes to mind is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And don't force help on people if they don't want it. That's another thing that we could get with Mars and Virgo, is wanting to or being inspired to fix everybody else's problems. And and the thing is, just because you think is something is a problem in somebody else's life doesn't necessarily mean that they do. So so ask, if someone would like your assistance before you go in and start messing around with things. What else? This is like, yeah, it's just a great time to roll up your sleeves and do all of the planning, organizing, and streamlining that needs to be done for a big project. That's where Mars and Virgo really excels. And then the day after that, July 11th, Mercury enters Leo. And as it does that, it squares the moon's nodes. And this gives Mercury the responsibility, if only for a few days, of having major impact on the trajectory of a project or a story, or just in general, the trajectory of what's going on in the collective. In other words, it again comes down to messages, information, news, conversations, and exchanges to show us some kind of path towards change or evolution or a turning point in a story. This is a critical week for the expression of thoughts and ideas and making sure they're understood. Some important things are going to hinge on the right message being told at the right time or being expressed at the right time. And in Leo, Mercury is very creative and passionate and expressive, but it also wants to make sure that it is received and is heard when they do express themselves. Mercury in this sign is attention getting, and it will try to dazzle you with a lot of sparkle and glamour, fabulousness. And in general, Mercury and Leo can just be a lot of fun and very entertaining, just highly enjoyable. But the thing we want to watch out for with Mercury in Leo is the message, like the meat of the story, what's trying to be relayed, the message or the information getting lost in the sparkle and the glamour and the drama or excitement. So something to look out for. And yeah, that's Mercury has a busy week, right? That's what it's doing this week. And so, you know, have fun with that, be expressive, but listen and listen close, listen deeply, because there's an opportunity that if you are not distracted by all of the razzle dazzle, you'll be able to key into something that's really like juicy, rich, and deep. So that's it for the week ahead. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk with Mandee Sheeler about homeschooling and the sign of Cancer. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and with me today via Zoom is astrologer and homeschooling parent, Mandee Sheeler. How you doing, Mandee?
Hi, Cory. I'm so excited to be here today. I get to talk about all of my favorite things with you.
Right.
Yeah,
And Mandee, before you begin, could you just like really quickly for our listeners who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you?
sure. Yeah. So, as you said, my name's Mandee Sheeler. I'm an astrologer, a writer. I produce the podcast version of the Cosmic Dispatch, and I am a homeschooling parent. So, I write for a publication called the St. Louisan, and then I also meet with people one-on-one for private astrology consultations.
All right. Thank you, Mandee.
Yeah.
So it's summertime, even though you can't tell by looking out the window here. So you're a homeschooling parent. Does that mean that you and your child, Silas, are on summer break?
So this was a fun question. I get asked this a lot this time of year, every year. It's we operate on like a 6 to 8 week schedule, so we're not necessarily on a break. I feel like a break implies that there's no learning happening, but education is kind of woven into the fabric of just our family culture. So I wouldn't call it a break, but we do have a little bit more of a relaxed schedule. At least he does. That generally means that like my part ramps up a little bit, prepping for the next
Right.
little session that we've got coming in the fall.
Ah, I love that though, by the way, that it's woven in. I think that's gonna what you just said is going to be woven into like the rest of what we talk about, because that's a beautiful thing. Among the many things that the Cancer archetype is about is home, parenting, and nurturing and safety. And these parts of the archetype um, made me think of a trend that I'm noticing amongst my friends with children. Um, and that is bringing children back into the home and having that be the place where education takes place, and having that be the role of the parent instead of the institution. Can you share with us, and whatever parts you want to share, um, about just your general experience of the homeschooling journey?
This is such a profound question, and I feel like we could really like talk about this for 4 hours. So I, like you said, I'll just give like bits and pieces, but homeschooling was something that I always personally wanted to do, and I had a vision of what I thought that would look like. Even through pregnancy, I'm gonna homeschool my kid, and people were like, okay, whatever. But then the time came for it to actually happen, and I started to get serious about it and like, okay, this is a big deal. What do I need to figure out? So it's been a lot of like looking to systems and structures that have been in place, but also like forging our own way and creating our own path within what homeschooling is or looks like for us. Um, yeah, I think I would prefer, honestly, I would prefer to send my kid to a different school setup. I love homeschooling, but as you said in the intro, Cory, schools are just such a different place now. They don't fit everybody's personalities or everybody's just ways of existing in the world. So I think doing that while figuring out what those things mean and like what values we have has been the 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 journey to get to where we are now. Does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, but what I'm hearing, and I think this is a benefit of homeschooling, is there isn't a structure locked down. This is just the way it is, and you have to jump through these hoops because this is the structure in place for everybody. We can't accommodate well anyway, like all the different needs each individual student has, whether that be, like um needs for any kind of like mental or physical disability, or just even learning style,
Yeah.
interest, and taking into account if the child has to leave the house to go to get their education, um what's going on in the home. Like, you can't address all those things with like one cookie cutter standardized structure. So I get it, and that's what you get to do. You get to make all these little adjustments, and it's so personal, and I love that. And when people talk about homeschooling, we're talking a lot about like, oh, how does this affect the children and their learning and their experience? But I'm sure that there's some benefit for you, I'm imagining.
Yeah, like for me personally, you mean
Hmm.
as mom and teacher? Yeah, so so many benefits. I would probably have an easier time listing off ways that it's not beneficial to my life, and there's only a handful of those. I think the biggest benefit is that I not only get to like witness my child becoming the person he's going to be and be available like all through that process, but like on a more like I don't know, selfish level, I get to like relearn things that I learned and revisit things with my kid and kind of experience parts of the world and parts of history through through that like wondrous eye that kids have. And I not only get to like witness my kid experience that, but it inspires me to like have that same curiosity to explore these things as well. And I think that's like amazing. It's such a cool opportunity. I think, we grow up and we become adults and the opportunities to learn aren't as abundant in adulthood once you kind of get caught in the grind and the, day to day. Um, so it's incredibly beneficial for just kind of expanding my own mind and my own experiences and knowledge.
Mm, yeah, wonderful. And so I have a logistic question
Sure.
that I think a lot of people would ask. So, okay, great. You have the capacity and the ability
Yeah.
because of your family setup to do that. What if both parents work full time? Is this still possible? Might we then have to extend the notion of like what home and family is?
Absolutely. I think I think all things are possible, right? We just have to get a little creative and kind of think outside of the box. The first thing that comes to my mind is even more questions. Just hearing that question, are both parents working outside of the home? Are they working from home? Is it a multi-generational family, or are there neighbor kids that are also homeschooling, or co-op groups in the so yeah, I think even though, and this kind of touches on something I think we'll get into a little bit more here, but like this idea of the elder, and that like all adults, I think, have something to offer educationally for children in life. And even if that's just showing children how to be in the world or at the grocery store or at the bank, kids have been put in this like we're kind of coming off of this children shouldn't be seen or heard type of thing, and I think kind of maybe millennial Gen X are like, no, I think our kids need to understand how to function in the world. And so to create more awareness around like whether you have your own kids or you have kids in your family or not, there's always, anytime there's a kid around in public, there's always going to be like the kid looking up to the adults in the room. And I think so, yeah, yes, in the family, but even if you don't have a huge family support system, branching out and finding other elders or other people to help
Mm, yeah,
is, yeah,
that's 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 such a cancerian edge, I think, because on the one hand, since we're trying to weave this into Cancer season, and I think it's totally appropriate. I think and I've heard this from some parent friends of mine. On the one hand, there's this idea that I don't want my kid, you
right.
know, learning anything, that I don't approve of from another source. And there's that Cancerian um
Oh,
trait
yeah.
of I'm keeping what's mine close to me, and I don't want to pollute the the lineage of, what my family used to do and then what I want to do and what I passed down. And if I just let them learn things from various people, that's going to mess up that nice tight family like tradition or line. And then I think that's also the new way to envision Cancer is, what if my community is my family? What if this set of, three or four other families is our extended family? These people who they're different from us, but maybe have some of the same values. Why wouldn't it be okay for my kid to go and spend a couple days with that family and trust that they're gonna be safe, and it's okay that they learn something different, and be exposed to difference. And so, yeah, within those two different ways of being is like a whole Cancer experience. And
Absolutely.
yeah, this nuclear family thing, I
Yeah.
don't, how 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 are people supposed to take care of themselves and other people and afford things and work? Like, I don't even have kids, and sometimes on my busier days when I'm trying to like do all of my things, I'm like, I always stop and think, how do people with kids do this? Like, yeah. So
It's not always, there's so much like parent shaming also, I think too. Like if you don't do the right thing, or if I don't think what they're doing is right, there's this like sense of shame, and also just shaming people for like having children. And it's not, it's, I just think societally there needs to be so many, you were talking about earlier, redefining family, redefining education, redefining community, just redefining all of these things. And I think that we're like in the thick of that. And I think it can go so many different ways. It's, yeah, I
yeah,
could go off on a tangent. Yeah.
we're in a so not only is the education system really changing, but also our notions about what is family, who qualifies as family, those things are really changing as well. And I think that's a good thing. Um, so back to a logistical question. When school is quote unquote in session, what would a typical day look like?
So our days, again, we do the weekly thing. So like every Monday looks the same, every Tuesday looks the same, give or take. We allow room for like life. So I'll tell you like the last year, I'll give an example from last year. Every Thursday, we met with a group from 9 a.m. to noon, and we did physics. We have a wonderful community person who was a teacher and is a retired teacher, and she gathers us with another family, and she taught our kids physics for 3 hours every Thursday. From physics, we would go to piano lesson, or I'm sorry, art class. It was art class and then piano. We would do physics and then an hour of art and then 30 minutes of piano, and then come home, usually be home in time for dinner, have some dinner, decompress. So that was kind of a heavier academic outside of the home day. Our inside of the home academic days are wake up, spend some time with a book. I drink my tea or my coffee. We really like to ease into our day. So we ease into our day, have some breakfast, and then we kind of clean up, brush our teeth, and get ready for the bulk of whatever the academic thing that we're doing for that day is. And that changes again. Different days we have different academic focuses. So the material may change, but I try to keep a similar flow throughout our days and find that's sufficient for maintaining routine.
That's so much nicer, this idea of easing into the day.
I like it.
And I don't know about you, Mandy, but when I was a kid, I like you could not get me like because we had to get up so early. And like it was just like this rush, 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 go, go, go. And I was just like hungry and miserable.
Yeah,
I'm not a morning
sleepy.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then it
yeah.
was like, and then
Go
you're
to
at,
school, turn your brain
yeah,
on.
for
Yeah,
like, 6 hours. And yeah, I experienced that as unpleasant.
me
So
too.
that just sounds so much
And my
nicer.
child, I think, would also.
And is astrology one of the subjects that you're teaching?
So not directly, if he has questions later, but we do a lot of like mythology and stargazing, and we do a lot of astro adjacent things, I think.
Well, astro is adjacent to just about every
Exactly.
single thing. Um, so yeah, astrology touches everything.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, there are so many ways to learn. And even like you and I are engaged in our own like teaching learning process, and I call it like an alternative learning system that, it's mentorship or apprenticeship. For those of you that don't know, Mandee is my, I guess, mentee, and then also is doing a type of apprenticeship. And there is no codified curriculum. And yeah, for those of you who wonder, you can go to an accredited astrology program. You can even go to an accredited astrology college and do your coursework and get a certificate at different levels of like, there is that set up in the astrology world, and we're not doing that. There's no codified curriculum, there's no certificate of completion. There's just a handing down of knowledge and experience based on relationship. And it's so interesting to me that this is considered, that's a different form of education. Um, when actually this is this is traditional education. Um, if you go back like even just like a few hundred years in like, quote unquote olden times, a student basically hung out with a mentor and learned from them through conversation and involvement in their work. There was a handing down of knowledge or craft within a family of practice. And then these practices become tradition. I don't care if it's like woodworking or yoga, the the tradition of mentorship far, extends further than institutionalized learning. That's actually a pretty recent thing. And usually the children ended up in the same profession as the parents or in the family business because that's what was going on in the house. And the children, again, were involved to the point of, having the profession be the family name. Like if you were a smith, it's because your family were like metalsmiths. um and this is all very Cancerian, just handing things down the line in a very organic and embodied way. And I feel that over the years, through industrialization and capitalism, we've commodified this very basic instinct to pass on knowledge in this way, in this lived way. And basically, we've moved this tradition of learning from Cancer to Capricorn, the institution. And all these, like, quote unquote, new ideas about learning are actually about a reclaiming a tradition of teaching from one of rote standardization to one of care and intimacy. It's like the difference between going to culinary school and learning to make a platonically, objectively perfect lasagna and being tested on that execution of that lasagna according to an objective measurement versus eating the lasagna your mom makes all the time, helping her in the kitchen while you talk, and you get to actually move through the way she does it. You just you you
Mhm.
take it in viscerally instead of like learning how something is supposed to happen. And then you get the experience of then eating that lasagna and sharing it with your family at dinner time. And then that lasagna has meaning. And and even educational experts have noted that when something is meaningful and emotionally connected, the learning is deeper. um, and learning is taking in something new. You can't take in new information if you're not relaxed or feel unsafe. If you don't feel safe, you will cling to the familiar instead of exploring the unknown. And actually, this came up. Mandee was visiting here a couple of weeks ago, and we were out on my property, and we get lots of animals. And a deer came out, and Silas, Mandee's son, said, "Oh, I want to go inside." And she was like, "Why?" And he's like, "I'm scared." And so, like, and this is what people do when they encounter something new. They usually, if they don't feel safe, they want to not take it in. But then Mandee said, "It's okay. And we're all here." And so he stayed outside and just checked it out and was open to the experience. But this is like this is what most people do. You're not going to take in anything new if you don't feel like you're safe. And it's important to know that you'll be loved and cared for as you go through the process of learning, because it inevitably includes failure and difficulty. And as someone who's done a lot of I've done so much formal education. I can say that the things I've learned from the teachers that I've had a personal connection with, the ones that I hung out with, the interactions that made me feel personally invested in, that knowledge is in my body and will always be there because I lived an emotionally engaged experience with them. That kind of mentorship and teaching is as old as time and is just as legitimate or more, I would think, than conforming to the norms of an institution. So, yeah, after my long-winded diatribe, sorry on
It was
that,
beautiful though. Yeah, it was
uh, we
great.
got we got to take a short break, and when we come back, more with Mandee Sheeler. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and with me today via Zoom is astrologer and homeschooling parent Mandee Sheeler. And we're just talking about homeschooling and different ways to learn and how that relates to the Cancer-Capricorn axis. Some, different ways to look at the whole educational situation. Um, so Mandee, are there any resources that you know of that you'd like to share with other homeschooling parents or parents who are homeschool curious?
Yeah, so there's so many more resources out there than I could possibly remember. I will say there are organizations that have super user-friendly um, websites that have the list of, you click on your state and it tells you all of like your state's standards or what's required from your state. You can find your own state governmental website would have helpful. So if you're looking for that type of material, like realistically, what does this look like? How many hours am I required to do? Because that differs state to state. So if you're, I almost said astro curious, that too. If you're homeschool curious, I would start there just because that's going to give you the rules that you're going to have to play within. And I think that that's going to, for me, that's where I started, and that allowed me to see that things can be broken down into like bite size. It doesn't, when you hear like, and I'm in Missouri, I have to do 1,000 hours in a year. Okay, but what does that look like each day if I do 3 days a week, 4 days a week? I think those are like logistic things to keep in mind and to look for. Again, just your state's government website would have a lot of that information. There's also, like, as for most things, a million Facebook groups that you can choose from. I found secular Kingston homeschool group on Facebook. I'm in a dozen Kansas City secular homeschool groups. You can find religious homeschool groups if that's what you're looking for. There's a lot of information on Facebook. Those are also great places to like ask questions, um, because if you have a question, chances are there's someone on a Facebook forum or on a Reddit forum or on some internet forum that's also asked that question. So even just Googling a specific question you have, but then things like National Geographic. I don't know the last time people have gone to the National Geographic website, but there's a lot of really cool stuff on there. And there's a lot of really cool free resources for homeschooling kids or families. I think there's a lot of free educational resources out there. I think we just have to kind of know how to find them and think outside of the box a little bit. So I don't know if that touches on your question, Cory, in a way that
No, that no, that's good. Like, I don't know anything about this. If I wanted to do this, I wouldn't know just the first place to just start looking and getting ideas. Um, and bringing this all back to astrology, you're developing something called Astro-Parenting. So what's that all about?
yeah, so this is kind of my baby project I've been working on. And it's, we've talked a lot about synastry on the show, Cory. It's a very similar thing. It's looking at parent charts, it's looking at kid charts, and it's not only helping develop and inform the relationship between the kid and the parent, but also giving parents something to look at to help mitigate any issues that may come up during their homeschooling experience. It's not limited to homeschooling parents, but it's, I think, just another great resource for gathering information to, again, understand and implement different homeschooling or learning techniques or styles, but then also to just understand relationships between parent and kid. Is that?
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that you've done your synastry, and synastry is the comparison between two charts. For those of you who don't know, that you've done your synastry with Silas and your partner, just to see what the dynamics are. And
Absolutely. And I've also just looked at my kiddo's chart and from my parent perspective and like, okay, what do I see here? And what I've found is the whole way this kind of got started was homeschooling comes with roadblocks and hiccups. It's not always a smooth, seamless thing, right? And so when I would get in these moments of, oh, okay, what am I doing? What's going on? Where's my kid at? I would look to his chart and either use different timing techniques. Okay, he's 7. He's doing that open Saturn square thing. He's feeling some kind of way about authority right now or discovering his own inner authority and just using the chart to help inform where we're at and what's going on and not only using it for that moment but to like, okay, this is when this might kind of lighten up and when I can shift gears again, because it's really easy to become consumed by like, this is the way it's going to be forever, when that's not always the case.
well, you're gonna have to tell us when you launch that, or when you do a first
Yeah,
workshop or offering. Okay.
absolutely. You'll be the first to know, Cory.
Yeah, I would think I would be one of the
Yeah,
first to know.
absolutely.
So also I threw out there, I knew we'd have a lot to talk about, but I threw out there on the Instagrams, if anyone had any questions, and we actually have like some pretty good questions, and I sent them to you as well, Mandee, and now, like, now that I'm like interviewing you, I'm not sure who's supposed to ask the questions. Um, but I guess I can. Um, oh yeah, we have time for a couple. Um, so one question that we got was, thinking about the big picture of preparing a child for adulthood, how do you think society may shift and adapt over the next decade or two as more children that have had alternative education experiences grow into adults?
Yeah, so this is such a juicy question. And again, something we could probably spend just an hour talking
Mhm,
about.
mhm.
So what Gemini brain, the first thing that came to my mind was, what does this person mean by preparing for a child for adulthood? So that's kind of
Mm.
where I'm going to go with this here and now. I kind of assumed that they're asking along the lines of like, how do you teach your child to become responsible or to provide care for themselves through adulthood, or how to be a productive member of society? So that's where I'm kind of coming from and answering this question. And I think, the best way to prepare kids for adulthood is again to just have them around adults, include them in what's going on in life. And so often it's like, well, I can't go do the thing because I've got my kiddo. I'm going to have to bring my kid along. Or people even say you can't bring your kid. But kids are just adults in training. And so how do you get that training without being exposed to different experiences? And guess what? Like, adults go to the grocery store and adults have to go get their oil changed, and we have to sit here for an hour. And so what do we do to manage our time, right? Like, those are all educational experiences that I think help prepare children for adulthood. But I don't know. That,
No, you're so right. And like we all kind of know this. Kids aren't really paying attention to what you tell them, what you like teach them verbally, but they are absorbing everything by watching and experiencing. And so give them experiences. I love this question too, and I made a little note here, and this is a hope. If
yeah.
things change over the next 2 decades or so, I'm hoping that we'll have more independent thinkers, people who aren't as reliant on certain codes and structures, and are able to think as individuals, and also think people who don't attach or feel the need to attach everything they learn, knowledge or skills, to a marketplace.
Mm,
The question of, it's like, oh, you want to study that, well, what kind of job can you get with that? It's like the value that we place on experience and learning is just, it's almost like there is no value unless there's a monetary value. And so I would really love to see that change. And also, um, if this happens, people who are more socially flexible, where, because right now, one of the purposes that the learning institution serves is as a way to like mark what social what social element you belong in. I mean, that's largely what our the culture of institution does right now. And so you might not see people from different walks of life as possible as other humans that you connect with, and that you could just like go and have a relationship with, because they're just humans. You have that social flexibility, which schools as they are right now, they do not promote that. They cloister, like they form these little cliques. um and so I would hope for some more social flexibility. And then we're really cutting it close here. Um, yeah, I don't think we can I don't think we
these
can
questions, they're
fit in
so
another
juicy.
question. We might have to extend, I think we are gonna extend this talk actually, because
Absolutely.
there is too much to talk about. But before we go, Mandee, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we say bye-bye?
I just find me on Instagram if you're interested in this, because I'll talk anybody's ear off about it anytime.
Okay. Yeah, on Instagram and at mandeesheeler.com.
Mhm.
you're available. And Mandee is usually here with me once or twice a month. So keep tuning into the Cosmic Dispatch and stick around for Radio Cake coming up right after. And I will see you next week. Stay well, stay dry, and yeah, have a great week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.